you get off the ship.
But where the
really bad.
So, Uruguay had,
Uruguay
and I
has
think, I don't think, I want to say Argentina. Maybe I was in Chile. Chile, Argentina. And there was another really nice one in Uruguay. I don't take pictures. Like, I like to look at the world. I don't want to look at the world behind my camera.
This is
Stressful.
So anyways, but I had taken a picture of it, and I thought, yeah. And I sort of thought it was funny because you could buy it there, and it was like, but it was amazing. Like all the time, it was always on the ship. It was like, what things are like, for matter of fact, drug use on the ship. Like, some people would smoke joint on the
right.
Immediate
Expulsion.
next protocol.
Wow.
For him.
But it'd be so nice.
Where is
you're on the deck. I mean, when you
Last week I worked.
You know, you can't smoke anywhere. Like it's, you know, smoking is a really big issue on a ship because people, you know, they flick the cigarette button to the ocean. Not really. The wind, you know, it's going to pull back and then send somebody else smoking and going down there. Like ship, so it's smoking is very regulated.
Vape bars. They need a vape bar.
Well, you probably, well, yeah, and, you know what? And I'm sure there's a lot of edibles that get on the ship. Yeah, no, but they're quite, and I imagine everything probably pretty bad for any staffers.
Where it was.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that I just think that people were like people, 80-year-olds were just getting off the ship to go to, okay, well, I'm going to buy some little, you know, Kitchka for the grandchildren. Oh yeah, I'm sure my little dope over here at the next stand for myself.
What was it? Was it just flour? Or did they have?
That's not easy.
They had salves.
Hopefully we don't need too much help.
Okay, I didn't know.
Well, that's good. You know, if your knees are bothering you.
Well,
Fingers crossed, yeah.
like I was on crutches for
$35 million.
8 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was walking around in this little town.
Yes, well, and get the price down.
And I took a step.
Well, it was interesting. You had that medium. Yeah, no.
And it was only because I had 2 pieces of luggage in a knapsack to get off the ship with. Or else I would have gotten off.
Beat on the workability of like
Got off. I was on
projects, things we want to get done. Let's scrap them.
So I saw a lot of the countryside on crutches. It's a good thing I know how to use them. Might be old, so I still have a little bit of strength.
Sometimes my face gets all red.
No, you look at this one. I got out of the
No, but
podcast.
I'm assuming somebody in the know would say, yeah, but you know what, we go around every so often, so get your project ready for the next round.
That's what I'm saying. I've told Marty on the phone to come to us with
Yeah,
that.
having meetings.
Figure out our meeting.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Remember that?
I think I have a loose ball.
And then it got moved. It was going to be on the
I just could not wait there on it. It was like starting. It was like okay, that was pain. I'm sure that that's not a problem. I picked up the stuff. I picked up
We were in the hot seat.
and it was like, no, that wasn't just like a one moment little.
Yeah, like an owl.
They're trying to figure out how to. Exciting.
Thanks, everybody, and welcome to Nelson City Council. And I just want to say we're starting a new year with almost a full new group of people, with the exceptions of Janice, Councillor Morrison. And bear with us because over the last couple of months it's been like drinking out of a fire hose, right, folks? And I'm really proud of the work that's been done over the last little while, and we'll get on our feet now in the next couple of months and start moving forward. So thanks everybody for showing up tonight and taking time to come out and pay attention to what happens in local government. Calling the meeting to order, and I'd like to start with the Aboriginal acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, Silix and the Sinaiks peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour their connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And I'd like a motion to, is there any late items before we ask for adoption of the agenda? Hearing none, I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Woodward, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. And we'd like to adopt the minutes, adoption of the minutes of the previous meetings, and they're all listed in front of you for November and December. And I'd like a mover and a seconder for the adopt the minutes of the previous meetings. Councillor Page, Councillor Lochtenberg, questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favour? Carried, thank you very much. Any recommendations coming out of the committee of the whole? And there's just one presentation connected to that tonight, right, Kevin? And it's up next, actually, and that's a request from the Nelson Civic Theatre. And the City of Nelson owns the Civic Theatre complex, and the Civic Theatre space was built theatre space, and is a large part of the building built in the 1930s. The Civic Theatre was operated as a private enterprise for a number of years, but with changing industry in the industry, it's become unable to continue to operate as a private enterprise. The Nelson Civic Theatre Society was formed 5 years ago to reopen the Civic Theatre movie theatre. Since that time, they have been successful in operating the theatre, upgrading the facility, creating employment, and growing the social enterprise aspect of the organization. With support from CBT, they have completed a full business plan, and the extensive preamble around this is in front of you. However, having said all that, there is a staff recommendation to support the Civic Theatre, and that Council approve the general terms for outline of line of credit between the City of Nelson and the Nelson Civic Theatre Society, which includes operation of a movie theatre and a community presentation space, a loan of $1 million, contingent on receiving grants of a maximum of $3.3 million. An annual loan payment will be, what is that word, Kevin?
Commensurate.
Commensurate with the amount borrowed, including principal and interest, authorized to be considered as at a mutual date. Maturity date of the loan, December 31st, 2031. The city to share the profits of the facility once the loan has been repaid in full and receive rent as per city policy. Now, I don't know if we want to do those separately, Kevin, or can we do them as a block and get it on the floor for discussion?
Yeah, so this is, just to be clear, these are, as we put in the resolution, the general terms, so they may change slightly when we hammer out an agreement with the society. So take those as the loans up to the $1 million, they may fundraise, and it may be less than that. We're looking at basically I think a 10-year repayment period. We're looking at 2031 when that would be paid off. And as far as whether there'd be profit sharing or just rent per city policy, again, we'd have discussions, but I think the bottom line is council would be looking at giving them relief for up to 10 more years on rent in basically in exchange for them to make substantial renovations in that building, up to $4.5 million worth of renovations when that loan's paid off. And the theater's operating at capacity, all three theaters, they start to make good profits that they'll be able to pay rent, or maybe some creative profit sharing with the Nelson Youth Soccer Association. We did a similar deal, and the deal there was that there would be some profit sharing, but the city would invest that back into facilities that would support soccer in our community. So that was the agreement we came up with, and we're just opening that up as there might be a way to do something similar in this case, but that will be sort of determined down the road.
And I think it's worth keeping in mind that 5 years ago, the society did say that their goal was to have 3 rooms to present movies. So they're slowly getting there, but slowly but surely. So anyway, I'd entertain a motion to support the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Morrison, and open to questions or comments, starting with the mover and the seconder, if you wish.
Sure. I have a small comment, and it's not in the motion, so but I think it's important. Is one of the things that the city was looking for was, or potentially looking at, was until the loan was repaid in full, to the NCTS cannot reduce fees. And one of my comments here is it's been a bumper year in movie sales in the U.S. and across, and one of the reasons is systems like MoviePass and subscription models and being able to stuff. So I would maybe just support that we let them manage their own fee structure in terms of.
Well, I think the reason we have those provisions, they have to have that discussion with us.
Yeah.
Right? So that they can, we're basing this on their business plan that they put forward. And if they say our strategy is to do this different type of thing and that makes sense and it's consistent with what they're trying to achieve as revenues, then we're going to agree to it. It just gives us a chance to, they're forced to have some of those discussions with
Well,
us.
that was my only concern. Is they're going to sell more for less than make more.
Yep. And
Make more.
yeah. So we're not trying to manage their business, but we do want to be able to have some input if they're proposing something.
Thanks, Kevin.
So I just,
Councillor Morrison.
I just say that I'm in favor of this in terms of the fact that we have a model where we've done this before with another group in town. I think that I can relate back to the fact that they've come in early in our last term of council asking for money, but they didn't have the requirements in place to really be giving it, good consideration. And I'm glad to see that they've gone out. They've got this strong business plan now, which was something that we were asking for, and just to assure people that they're paying back the interest plus 1%. It's quite a bit in this document, so it's not like it's free money. They will be paying a little bit extra all during the time as part of the carrying charges of this loan. So I think that they've got a good leadership team in place currently. They've got a strong board that are committed. This always is an issue if the board is weak when it's a volunteer group, that sometimes the best laid plans then have difficulty with being fulfilled, but this has got a strong volunteer board. So I feel confident that they'll be able to meet the terms that have been set out in the agreement with the city.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I just have a point of clarification. So regarding where it says until the loans have been repaid, as Councillor Page was discussing. So we're not actually voting on that because that's not part of the motion. Is that correct? That's just what the city anticipates to be sort of negotiating on.
Correct.
Okay. And then I have a second question. So actually I have two more questions. On point 2, I felt like what the mayor was reading wasn't the motion that's in front of me. So I just wanted to get a point of clarification on that. If there had been a change?
No.
No, it was the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, we just didn't want to, in speaking with them on the resolution, I think that probably if you haven't uploaded the new one, it goes from 120 to the new.
Okay.
Talking about point 2?
No.
Or point 3?
In the recommendation, sorry, point 2, loan of up to 1 million contingent on receiving grants of minimum 3.3 million.
Yeah.
And then I thought that there had been something else that was said after that. Maybe I don't have the most updated
No,
version.
that's correct on here. I think the mayor said maximum, it's minimum.
Okay. And then my sort of last question is the profit sharing and the rent. And I'm just a little bit concerned that it's vague, and I'm wondering if we want to have something in a recommendation, if we want to have a motion that is vague to the 5th point, so that the city to share profits of the facility once the loan has been repaid in full, or receive rent as per city policy. The city policy wasn't attached, and I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure exactly what we're voting on in that case.
It was left, it's vague for a reason, because first of all, they have to get, we're here saying that we're going to support you. The terms of the loan and getting that contractual base is a conversation we need to have with them, especially with them coming at the cow late in December and then Christmas break and whatnot, and getting this in front of council. That hasn't been nailed down. So that's, again, what's allowing us there is the ability to work with them when they get to that situation, to be able to work through the process. So it's not made in stone. It's sort of trying to figure out what would be our best arrangements, and also respecting the fact that we've made other loan arrangements with other groups, and we don't want to make a one-off. We want to be consistent with how we apply that.
So may I just do a follow-up then?
Absolutely.
So then should the last point say city to negotiate share in
These are all the
profits?
terms of the negotiation.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is, if council, you're comfortable that as a minimum, you will receive rent based on your policy, when this loan's repaid, or there may be a different arrangement that would be, superior to that. That's basically where you're at.
Okay.
Councillor Anderson, are you okay now?
Yeah.
So if you're not clear,
No,
time.
I'm okay with it for right now.
Councillor Woodward.
So I just wanted a clarification here with the loan up to $1 million. That's not necessarily they're going to spend that $1 million. They may find other forms of revenue, but it is a backup plan for them.
Right. It allows them to be able to file the application for the grant. So if they don't have this, then they don't have the ability to follow. So we're being that concrete pillar to support them. Obviously, their goal would be not to have a loan, and they will, I know the team there will be working very hard to beat the bushes to make sure that if possible, they don't need a loan from us at all.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we all okay now? Okay, and I think as many of these particular situations arise, it's really prudent to bring up the kind of questions you brought up, Councillor Anderson, and that sort of, staff now knows that they need to be coming forward with the finalized document that they have to take into account some of the suggestions that you just brought forward, some of the questions you had. So hearing no further questions, I'd like to call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Carried. Thanks very much. Next. So we have a development variance permit for 212 Victoria Street. The Development Service has received an application to vary the zoning bylaw 3199/2013 and the off-street parking and landscaping bylaw number 3274/2013 for a triplex at 212 Victoria Street to increase the height envelope and reduce the parking stall width. And the background is in front of council. Full analysis. Thanks to staff for doing an excellent job in laying this out. And there is a recommendation, and if you want to scroll below that, just in case you haven't, and I'm sure you have, is supporting information below the recommendation. So I'll read the recommendation for council, and those of you who are here from the Civic, you can stick around if you want, or you can leave. It's up to you. Thanks very much anyway. Thank you very much. The council passed the following resolution that the application for a development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199/2013 and the off-street parking landscaping bylaw number 3274/2013 to allow the construction of a triplex on the subject property be approved for Lot 6, Block 93, District Lot 95, Kootenay District Plan 9500 for 212 Victoria Street as follows. To increase the height envelope 0.27 meters, that's which is 11 inches, on both interior sides, subject to the maximum building height being reduced from 10 meters to 9.5 and increase the side setback from 1 meter to 1.2 meters. Off-street parking and landscape bylaw number 3274/2013, section 762, to reduce the parking stall width for one parking stall from 2.75 to 1.99 meters.
There's the subject
So
to.
there's two pieces there. So
There's the subject to underneath that last part.
beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, on the next page. Subject to a covenant first being registered on the title for 210 Victoria, stipulating that 0.76 meters in width and 6 meters in length of the parking will be reserved in perpetuity for parking belonging to 212 Victoria. So in the preamble, you'll see that the same owner owns both properties, and they're agreed among themselves to allow this to happen. So did you want these as separate or together? Are they okay together?
I think they have to be together, right?
Yeah.
To make this viable. Or at least
I
the
would-
parking has to be, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just the two of them here that,
It's just, yeah.
and of course, the subject to is
Part of that. Yeah.
part of all of that.
Part of it,
okay?
yeah.
So you have number one and number two, Councillor, and you have options obviously to approve or not. So we need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Renwick and seconded by Councillor Anderson. questions or comments by the mover or seconder?
Maybe you want Natalie to speak to.
If we have a question, we'll
Sure.
ask it. Okay, so
I
do
do.
you have a question?
Well, I would love Natalie to speak to this first. I went and visited the property yesterday. Matt? Jake, sorry, and had a chat with Jake. But there is some neighbor concerns, and yeah, I would love to have your take on it, Natalie.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I've kind of outlined in my proposal, do you want me to speak more about the neighbor concerns or more about just the proposal in general and why we're supporting it?
Maybe both.
Okay. Okay, so they're proposing a 3-unit building very close to downtown. And the first variance is to reduce the height envelope or to increase the height envelope of regulation 11 inches on both interior sides. And that regulation requires that a building step back at 45-degree angle once it hits 7 meters in height. And this was designed to reduce shadowing on adjacent properties. So in support of their application, the applicant submitted a shadow study that demonstrated that if they reduced the height by 0.5 meter and increased the setbacks by 0.2 of a meter, then they could have the comparable shadowing to what the regulation required. So if you look at the shadow study in there, they're pretty much equivalent, which is what we wanted and why we supported the application. And the reason that they're asking for this is because it creates additional construction costs to step the building in. Going straight up is just more cost effective. And the second reason is because these are not huge units, and so the third unit will be smaller if they have to step the building in, and so it reduces the usable space. The second variance request is to reduce the parking stall width for one parking stall by 0.76 meters and put that remaining area on the adjacent property. So it's quite a clever trick that they have because they own both parking stalls. Not everybody, or both lots, not everyone can do that. And so the variance request will allow the development to add an additional housing unit while meeting the parking requirements. And just something to note on that, the reason that staff also support this is because it aligns with the official community plan's objectives to provide infill housing close to amenities and services. And so staff are in support of this proposal because the height will be reduced 0.5 meter than permitted in the zoning bylaw. And the side setbacks will be increased more, so they'll have more space on the sides of the house. And they'll also meet their parking requirements. And from the city's perspective, this aligns with our long-term policy objectives, and we'll gain an extra residential unit, and the neighborhood will benefit from a slightly more compact development. And then, is there any particular questions you had about the park, about some of the letters? Or just...
Not really. I did go yesterday, and because when you look at it on the presentation and see it physically, it looks a lot better physically than the presentation.
Yeah.
And my concern was, I'm not a fan of jamming things in, but all the homes in that block are this far apart. So it kind of works. And I know there was a handwritten letter from a couple that had been there for 54 years that had a concern.
Yeah.
And the parking, well, we all have a parking issue in Nelson, but I like their plan. I like the project, but I feel for the people that have been there for a long, long time. Yeah.
I know. You know, I think these applicants are trying to do their best to accommodate the parking on a really tight site. It's so close to downtown, and they have metered parking on the front, and so it does create challenges for that block. But in terms of the area in the back, they can, between the two lots, fit more than our parking requirements. So I feel that they'll have adequate room to get in and out, but I do know that that whole area, yeah, they struggle a little bit with parking. So I can see why the neighbors have concerns, and I do feel for them for that.
Yeah, and I think a key point there is that we actually take away the parking with metered parking too. So we're somewhat responsible for the shortage of parking for everybody on that street, not just. So anybody that's creating parking, additional parking behind the property is a good thing for us.
Absolutely.
Next, Councillor Woodward.
I also went and looked there, and I feel somewhat torn. I really think we need development, and we need housing in this town. It's hard because the people that are nearby these developments can be affected. Their property values can be affected, or their property can be affected. But I do feel like, with a 0% vacancy rate in this town, we're in desperate need of housing. And this is a densification of housing, which is really important for the future of Nelson. Single-family homes are wonderful, but they're not, super efficient. And this is a very efficient use of space. I'm just saying it was a tough call, and but you can see why they're doing it.
Thank you. Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, I just have a question, and perhaps through the chair to staff, in terms of the fact that, in terms of our short-term rental regulation, my understanding is the proponents here already have a short-term rental in the building that they own at 210. How many more short-term rentals can we have on that block? Can they make this triplex into short-term rentals as well?
So on the block, they can have 3 short-term rentals. So they already have 1 in that 1 unit. And then in this new development, they could only have 1 annual short-term rental license. So the other 2 would have to be long-term rentals.
Okay, and there's nobody else. I guess my concern is just when I think about parking in general, does anybody else on that block have a short-term rental?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And then they have to occupy, do they not? Or it's the renter that can?
Yeah, there's some stipulations. So it'd have to be the primary residence of that building, and then they'd be able to rent out one of the units as a short-term rental, but somebody would have to be a primary residence and be responsible for it. So there's some rules around it, but they could make one of the units a short-term rental. And that is allowed in all of our residential zones with some stipulations.
Yeah. So I don't think they can build this as long-term rental, not live there and have a short-term rental.
That's correct. That's correct.
Councillor Anderson.
So just for clarification then, if they were then to build just the 2 units, then that could be 1 unit they'd live in, the other unit could be rented out. So in effect, by having that 3rd suite, we are definitely getting a long-term rental out of this.
You could look at it that way for sure.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? None. Carried. Thanks very much. Okay, onward and upward. Next is development variance permit application for 321 and 323 Chatham Street. Development Services received an application to vary the zoning bylaw 3199 2013 for the building of a duplex to increase the maximum lot coverage from 40% to 44%. And once again, there's good background information supplied by our staff. And I'm assuming council has read all of this. And there is a recommendation that the application for the development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199 2013 to allow for the construction of 2 duplexes on the subject properties be approved for lot 7 and 8 block plan NEP 284B District Lot 96 Kootenay Land District 321 323 Chatham Street as follows. Zoning bylaw 3199 2013 section 416 to increase the lot coverage from 40% to 44% on each lot, and subject to that the building be completed in general conformity with the plans drawings as submitted. So we need a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lochtenberg. Questions or comments from the mover or seconder? Hearing none. Anybody else? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. On to Latimer Street. Holy smoke. Busy down there at Development Services. Right, Pamela? Okay. 1102 Latimer Street. Development Services received an application to vary zoning bylaw 3199-2013 for the proposed carport renovation at 1102 Latimer Street, to vary the maximum exterior side lot line setback from 1.5 to 0 meters. And once again, there's a full report with maps and diagrams, etc. And the recommendation is that the application for development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199-2013 to allow for the renovation of a carport on the subject property be approved for Lot 1, District Lot 182 Plan, NEP 6503, 1102 Latimer Street as follows. To vary the maximum exterior side lot line setback from 1.5 to 0 meters as per attached plans. That's the recommendation. We need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments from the mover or seconder? Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor? Thanks very much. Where are we heading now? Back to Victoria Street?
Yep.
Is this a trick? Is this a trick, Pamela? No? No tricks? Okay. Development Services received an application to vary a zoning bylaw 3199-2013. That bylaw sure getting a lot of interesting. That's only that's not that long ago, 2013, when it was changing. For the proposed single family home with a secondary suite at 811 Victoria Street, to vary the minimum rear lot line setback from 3 meters to 1.2. And once again, thanks for excellent report and full information in the package. And there is a recommendation, Council, that the application for development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199-2013 to allow for construction of a single detached residence with a suite on the subject property be approved for Lot 17 and 18, Block 8, District Lot 95, Plan NEP 9500, 811 Victoria Street as follows. To vary the minimum rear lot setback from 3 meters to 1.2 as per the attached plans. And once again, we need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Anderson, questions or comments from either one of you? Hearing none, Councillor Page.
Yeah, I had some questions back to the short-term rental. Like in this situation, we have a laneway house that won't presumably have a primary residence in it because it's essentially 2 different suites on top of the property. How is this one going to work?
Yeah, sorry, so 2 separate suites. So there is already a short-term rental on the property. So in the existing house, there's an annual short-term rental license for not the entire home, entire dwelling unit, but for I believe it's 1 bedroom, possibly 2. I think just 1. So there's already an annual license for the property. So there cannot be a second annual license for 811 Victoria Street.
These will definitely be long-term.
Yeah, they cannot be, unless it's shifted over, unless the one for the primary house is cancelled.
Yeah, so it's by property, right?
It's by property,
So
yeah.
there's these 2 units on that property. They could make one of these suites short-term, but they couldn't hold a short-term in the house then.
In the existing house, exactly.
Okay. And we're going to have sufficient parking on this property, given these additional suites?
Yeah, so the parking requirement is met. So the existing house has 2 dwelling units, but the house was built predating parking requirements, so there isn't a requirement for any houses. A house that's built in 1901, for example, there isn't a parking requirement. So there are going to be 2 stalls on the property, so 1 for each of the new units, meeting the requirement.
Okay, so this development doesn't cause us to revisit if there's sufficient parking compared to what we would normally do in a
No, exactly. And there is, existing parking now off of the lane, and there'll still be the parking requirement will be met under our bylaw. So that's why they're not seeking a variance for it.
Okay.
The other thing too is it's going to create a bit of traffic on the lane as well, which is a good thing because we've always talked for years. People have talked about that lane being more active corridor through there, which it currently is, and it could stimulate other opportunities for business to operate into the laneway as much as onto Baker or Victoria for that.
Precisely, yeah, and just a block down, so downhill, essentially westwards. Then on Heritage Lane, you have C1 zoning down there as well too, right? You know, at Hall Street, and yeah, it's quite a walkable location for sure.
I was just curious about how big is that rock?
It's big.
Yeah, you can see a photo of it in the report there too, but yeah, it's even more impressive in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the property owner tried to do something about that rock, but it wasn't feasible. That rock needs to stay. It holds up.
Big explosion.
It props up the existing house, right? So it's propping up the soil for the whole slope there. So it was more efficient just to go for a variance request and acknowledging that rock should probably stay there for everyone's safety.
All right, very good. Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Carries. Thanks very much. Okay, Alex, I see you're here tonight, so in case we have a question or two for you, and thanks Pamela and your staff for your help. Electric utility. And the electric utility bylaw number 3440/2019 to be introduced for the first of 3 readings. At the December 11, 2018 council meeting, council was presented with the background information on the 2019 electrical rates change for the utility, and council indicated an interest in rate smoothing for 2019. And Alex, you'll be able to fill the public in on that smoothing piece when we get to it if need be.
Sure.
At the December 17 council meeting, council was provided with further information on several rate increase options, including modified rate smoothing and the averages and disadvantages. And there's once again a full report from our staff, and there is a recommendation, folks, and the council pass or not the following resolution: that the Corporation of the City of Nelson's Electrical Utility Amendment Bylaw number 3440/2019 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Do you want to do these one at a time, Kevin?
Yeah.
I think Sarah, sorry. One at a time. And I'll read the next one, but I'll just so you know, we're just doing them one at a time. And the next one is that the Corporation of the City of Nelson Electrical Utility Amendment Bylaw number 3440/29 be read a third time. So we're dealing with number 1 first. And we need a mover and a seconder to start the conversation. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Morrison. Any questions or comments from the mover or the seconder? Hearing none. Anybody else? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. And number 2, that the Corporation of the City of Nelson Electrical Utility Amendment Bylaw number 3440/29 be read a third time. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Page. Questions or comments?
So maybe we just should.
Perhaps
Yeah.
we could have,
Bit of a preamble from Alex, yeah.
in terms
So
of
just
what
give
rate
us
smoothing is
an
and
overview, Alex, without rehashing the full piece that's here unless you feel it's necessary.
Okay, well, I'll give you the overview.
Yeah.
During the business planning, we did talk about various rate options, including rate smoothing, which council indicated interest in, so that's the proposal that came forward and is presented here. And that rate smoothing is having a larger increase in 2019 followed by smaller increases in the subsequent 3 years than would have otherwise happened, to try and levelize rates. And just for information, all of those rate increases over the 3-year forecast are lower than what we're expecting from BC Hydro and Fortis. Fortis, for example, is having a 0% in 2019 followed by 4.some% in the following year, and we'd be looking at 1.5% followed by about 2.5% or so.
And that's the urban side.
That's right, yeah.
So I think we just need to differentiate that.
Yeah. And that's why there's 2 rate changes there, a 1.5 for the urban side and a 2.94 on the rural side. And that 2.94 on the rural side then just keeps up with operating expenses, but not any return to the shareholder. Operating expenses have been increasing at basically inflationary rates, except for vegetation management, which we bumped up the budget because our reliability stats are showing that tree problems are having a negative impact on our reliability, so we're going to step up the vegetation management to try and address that.
And I think as council knows, the rural side of the utility, ultimately the utility commission will rule whether, make a decision whether the rate increase that we proposed and hopefully council adopts is acceptable to the utility commission. We have to justify that to them. So council sets the rate, says we think this is reasonable. The utility commission will then review that decision and either agree with us or ask us to make changes.
Thank you. Councilor Morrison, anything?
Well, just to staff. And so the point also being that if the increases that we have within the city of Nelson do not have to go to BCUC.
Correct.
I mean, I think that's always important to mention, is that, not that
Yeah.
we would suddenly go wild and crazy, but the fact is that we do, as with water and sewer, are very concerned about increases in costs for the city of our city residents, but it does not have to be reviewed by BCUC.
Correct.
And, you know, there's some different policy decisions that council makes for the city side of the utility versus the regulatory requirements that the utility commission is looking at for all those utilities that they regulate. There's regulatory principles that they use that council uses different for our utilities. For example, we build reserves for our utilities. That's not a regulatory principle on the regulated side of it or the BC utility side of it. So there, so we will be doing more on this as we roll out that. That, you know, it's just important to know that there's different policy decisions there, and we're a bit more restricted in on the rural side of it because of those regulatory principles that have been established over many years for the rest of the province.
Thanks, Cal. Thank you. Just a minute, Alex, and just in case there's another question, but I'm going to call the question on the first. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lockenberg, you had a question.
Thanks. Through the chair. Alex, would you be able to speak to, just briefly, about the difference between the rural rate and the city rates and why there's a difference? And also, very quickly, just again on the vegetation management and where that vegetation management is going to happen.
Yeah, okay, so two parts to that, the difference between the rural and the urban side. The basic difference is the density of customers or load per geographic area. So obviously much more dense in a city than it is in the rural side, so therefore our operating costs are a bit higher on the rural side because you got more miles of line per customer, so to speak. There is also a bit of difference in usage patterns in that rural customers have a higher usage per customer because there is less natural gas available in the rural side. So those two factors kind of are opposing each other, but the density is the dominating effect.
Right.
And so, for example, on the vegetation management, we have much higher vegetation costs per customer in the rural area than we do in the urban, just because there's so many more kilometers of line to manage to get to that customer.
Right. And just a quick follow-up, thank you for that. The other thing that I think any opportunity we have to clarify this for the public, because, you know, Nelson having its own utility, its own dam, it's an unusual situation for a city to have. So anything we can do to clarify how it all works, I think is beneficial. So in terms of our energy efficiency programs, and I know this is not directly related to our rates, but again, just to take any opportunity we have to clarify, we have a program that's administered by Nelson Hydro to encourage people to switch over to heat pumps, for example, to move from, if we can, from natural gas into electricity. Is this part of your visioning in terms of where rates are going to go, planning for potential rate hikes or load changes or changes in demand?
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of maybe like part ABC answer there. So we have an energy efficiency program called EcoSafe, but that's run through Nelson Hydro. And we don't specifically provide rebates, say, for switching to heat pumps, but we help customers access those rebates that are available through Fortis BC or the provincial government. And we have basically paid our share of funding those programs through our wholesale rates we pay to Fortis. But the rebate check wouldn't come from Nelson Hydro per se, but we would help the customers access that. I think the second part was, do we see that fitting into the long-term plan for energy usage? Yes, we do, because we think as the province and Nelson strives to have a lower greenhouse gas footprint, part of that is converting from natural gas or other fossil fuels to things like heat pumps, and that'll be part of the ongoing modus operandi for years to come, and that we're going to see more and more people, not only in Nelson but all across the province, do that. And that would increase electricity sales, which, because it increases volume, helps to actually reduce the per unit cost, or lower it than it otherwise would have gone up to.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, so just a reminder that we're doing number 1 on the list here, so all in favor?
We did one.
Yeah.
Just
We're on
one.
two.
Number two.
We're on two.
Third reading.
We're on third reading.
Third reading, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay. Tim, should you not be running out there after that guy? How is the Valley Voice going to? The Valley Voice is not going to be the same. Okay, and next is the water and sewer rates. And it's the first of 3 readings again. The city reviewed the long-term operating and capital plan for water and sewer utilities. The purpose is to ensure that the rates are set at a level that ensures sufficient funds are available to cover the annual operating, capital expenses, and provides for adequate reserves to fund future capital expenditures. The City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment 2019 Water and Sewer Rates Bylaw number 3439 2019 is introduced and presented for the first of 3 readings. Similar to the last one, lots of good information. I'm sure everybody's gone through it. And there is 2 recommendations here again, of course. The Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment 2019 Water and Sewer Rates Bylaw number 3439 2019 be introduced and read a first time and read a second time by title only. Mover, seconder, please. Councillor Woodward and Councillor Anderson. Any questions or comments from either one of you? Councillor Woodward.
Sorry, it's actually about part of the package. Should I wait on that?
This item?
Yeah, or can I ask that question now?
Go ahead.
Anytime you want.
Okay. So in this agenda package, there was the City of Nelson's total water use from 2008 to 2018.
Yeah.
It's incredible how well we've been doing with saving water through different practices and reductions. And I was just really curious, in 2016 there was a huge drop, and I was just wondering what that was. I'm sure it was told to us at some point.
Yeah, and weather, really.
It was
It was,
weather.
yeah, so if you think even, again, sometimes we forget, but last 2 years we've had a pretty drought and hot summers. 2016, very wet late summer, and we had a bit of a sudden break, but it was mostly very, very rainy and very, very wet. 2016. It's also quite fascinating when you look at it, because it is in increments of 50,000 when you look at the numbers. So again, sometimes you're like, that's a big drop. And actually, as we discussed, one of the challenges that we have with one of the customers that we were working on, if we actually had them at a proper amount, we would actually be at 2016 level. it kind of even right now sort of thing. So that's certainly something that we're looking up, trying to tighten up. And again, more of those leaks that we talked about that we've been finding and on the leak detection, and we're again starting to draw that down. And again, as we discussed before, the removal of the galvanized piping and really just shows on conservation, because also seeing our residents heeding the warning, especially in our summer time of water pressure, and really trying to help us and assist us with our water usage.
It's really, with the graphs, it's really pretty incredible how well we've done as a city.
It's a credit to the people that are working on it too, that, over the years have sort of got this figured out almost to the gallon. And I don't know if any had a chance to go in and talk to the folks that monitor it right next door here. So if you get a chance one day, just drop in there and you'll see all the computers where they can monitor the water, and do an excellent job of staying on top of that. And of course, as was identified in this preamble here, our biggest challenge over the years has not necessarily been consumption, but leakage in our system, and now we're slowly getting on top of that. So it's been a good investment for our taxpayers. These rates have been a good investment.
Thank you.
All right, so we have sorry, Councillor Lockenberg, go.
Very, very briefly, through the chair to the staff, can you speak to that one, the one challenge that we're having right now? Can you, one, the status of it, and two, just to clarify, what's the scale of leakage that we've got? So for the public, a lot of our water savings is coming through plugging leaks, basically, whether they be city infrastructure or some or individuals. We do have some challenges with getting people on board with fixing leaks on their own properties. I mean, in general, people really want to fix leaks on their own property, but sometimes we have a challenge with that. Without specifying anybody, I just would like a brief update on where we are with some of our, I don't want to say worst offenders, but biggest challenges.
Heavier water users?
Yeah. And so on that basis, I know that the public works staff that were engaged with the challenging situation were away, and I know that they were going to be in contact and shared with what council's concerned about wanting to work with them on trying to assist and where we can, but also understanding that we need to look at changing of a rate. So I don't know where that conversation is had, as Christmas has just sort of ended and we're just sort of back into the swing of things, but we'll certainly find out and hopefully maybe even have an answer for tomorrow at budget meeting.
Great, thanks.
Magnitude, like I said, based on my calculations, if they were to tighten up at 2% savings on the overall usage of our water.
Right, 2% overall.
Of the 2 million, yeah.
One user.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor of number 1? Carried. And on to number 2, which is the Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment, 2019 Water and Sewer Rates Bylaw number 3439, 2019, be read a third time by title only. Mover and seconder, Councillor Page, Councillor Renwick. All in favor? Kevin?
I just want to identify one thing which I know is in the report, but I think it's important, just how much of the water mains and that we've replaced and how many of the sewer mains that we've relined. Like, we're 30% plus in our system, which is huge. That's a lot of renewal. And the other thing is the cost that we're being able to achieve to replace that at, when we're 30 to 50% on the water side, replacing that less than was identified and budgeted by our consultants when they looked at that, and that was based on what we were paying to get those replaced at the time. So on the water side, certainly getting the equipment and the staff trained that we could do a lot of that work ourselves has really paid off. And when you look at 30 to 50% saving, that utility at the market values is at $90 million worth of water main replacements, and when you're thinking of 30% of 90 million, it's millions of dollars. And on the sewer relining side of it, the same thing we're seeing. And that part of that is just the technology on that side, but we've been certainly very fortunate. There was this leakage that or a collapsed pipe actually of a sewer main that was coming from the Hume Hotel underneath the highway out to the back of our building. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, we would have had to dig that up. It's super deep and would have cost us a significant amount of money. Just the change in the ability to manage those things, they were able to put another pipe through there. So we've been, not just on the amount that we've done, but the price point we've had has been really impressive, and our staff, our contractors have really stepped up and really done a great job for us.
Your Worship, if I may, also,
Yeah.
if you're okay, just and with council, just making sure again as we talk about it with the public, but there is a bit of a change that we have seen, and now again for most people when they look at their bill as a resident, they're not going to see any change if they look just down at the bottom. But when you look at what we've kind of been faced with some challenges at the wastewater treatment plant, and trying to handle some of the work that we need to get done there, but also taking the benefit of the good work that we've done on the water utility and the big grant that we have to do some work there, that we're looking at, where we have proposed as staff to have just a reallocation. So if you're in a regular residential home, you're not going to see any difference on your bill per se, other than the inflationary increase, which is about $18 on the year, is for the both of them. But there is a higher amount going to the sewer utility this year and a lower amount going to the water utility, and an ability to help us fund some of the challenges that we're facing under the wastewater plant.
Good. It's interesting because we started talking about this in 2005 and didn't really get going until 2006 or maybe 7, and it was a 20-year plan, and we're about roughly not even halfway there yet, and we've conquered 40% of them. So the projections were pretty darn good, I would say, at that time, even though we were kind of, without putting anybody on the spot, we were kind of flying off the seat of our pants at one point, but it's worked out very well. So, okay, so all in favor? The final number 2? Carried. Thanks very much. All right. Road closure. Okay, so this is a portion of Houston Street that at a meeting held in February 2017. So we can pass the buck on this one, folks. Now that John is here. 2017, council agreed to sell a portion of a road allowance to the owner of Parcel A, District Lot 304, Kootenai District Plan 8718 at 1523 Cedar Street. In order to facilitate the sale, a portion of Houston Street road allowance must be permanently closed by bylaw. The Houston Street road allowance closure bylaw is presented for the first of 3 readings, and once again there's lots of supporting info there, and there's first and the third reading available to council, and there's a recommendation that Houston Street road closure bylaw number 3438 2019 be read a first time and a second time by title only. This is number 1. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick. Any questions or comments from either one of you folks? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. And final and third reading would be that Houston Street road closure bylaw number 3438 2019 be read a third time by title only. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Anderson, Councillor Morrison, all in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Got all that? Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Environmental Health Services. That's quite a title for this, Kevin. How did we come up with that? Where'd that come from? That's kind of upscale stuff dealing with garbage, isn't it?
Ministry, yeah.
Oh, that's what the ministry calls it? Okay. Yeah, when I read that, I thought, what's going on here? Each year, council reviews the rates and charges to collect and dispose of waste and recyclable materials as part of the annual budget process. The purpose of this review is to ensure that the rates are set at a level that ensures adequate funds are available to cover the annual operating expenses, which include an equipment usage charge, to provide the service and fund the equipment reserve to allow for future purchase of equipment. For 2019, Council has determined that there will be no changes to rates. However, as a result of a discussion around composting, Council has proposed a resolution on this topic that needs to be approved. So we were doing really good till the composting thing came out, guys. And now we're looking for, I think it's 20 grand, Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, once again, there's lots of background information here. And Council passed, there's a recommendation, the Council passed the following resolution, that the residential waste rates as established in Schedule P of the Fees and Service Charges Bylaw 2019, that Council directs staff to allocate $20,000 from the Recycling Reserve Fund to any additional cost to the public education, including a staff portion regarding household composting not covered by operational revenue. And the Council informed the RDCK that the city will not participate in the RDCK's outside curbs composting program. Got that, Jonathan Brittany? Okay, so that's the recommendation. So we need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Morrison, and second by Councillor Renwick. Any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question only because, and my apologies for not being here for part of this discussion, because I know I've missed a meeting somewhere along the line where you guys have talked about this. But I am curious because I do know that we will need, as part of the changes to the recycling program and the sort of end of blue bags, have to look at a different system for that, which in all intents and purposes means a different truck. And I know that the current truck we have is wearing out. Should we not, I guess my question is, you guys made a decision, I don't know how it got there, but I would have been kind of probably a little bit vocal about saying, maybe we put it up a smidge, these rates, to fill up the coffers for the purchase of the new equipment, which may or may not also include the city actually purchasing for every resident an appropriate garbage container, as opposed to, like, to me it's like the pain is always a little bit less if it's a few pennies now instead of a few dollars. So I just, if somebody could just simplify for me what the discussion was.
So, and that's maybe one of the things that might have been confusing in the preamble that the mayor spoke to, is the fact that we do already charge every year out for the use of the vehicle. So that money, since its inception of being purchased, has been put into the equipment reserve. So that money is available, has been available, and is ready for purchase. One thing about the vehicle itself, and one of the things that we do need to do in the next 6 months, is to try to make the decision on the vehicle, because it will take probably 6 months to a year to get it. So we have some time on that. So again, there would be one of those understandings of what is the decision that is made, because it's not until July of 2020 that we actually have to have it here and working and in place. So we've got a bit of time. So that's one of the reasons that we decided that we wouldn't necessarily make an increase or a change in rates right now. I feel pretty proud of the fact that the recycling and resource recovery that we do is bar none some of the most efficient in the province, and a very piece where you pay your flat fee, but then if you have the incentive of trying to recycle, because we don't charge anything for recycling bags, but we do charge the bag a tag for your physical bag, and how that's been rolling through. I think that we've been very solid on what we're seeing for numbers, and we've seen good results on some of the audits that we've been doing on people putting their garbage out, and we're seeing very good compliance. And again, also a drop in our results in our audit for our recycling, which again was one of the challenges we were having, where actually our garbage was going up because people were trying to do good things with the recycling and not putting some of the items in, which kind of makes the whole bag garbage. And so we've seen some real improvements there. It'll be important to see what Recycle BC, we want them to come out and do some more audits to see where we're at. Again, the long of it is that we have some time to figure out what kind of vehicle that we need. We have been putting in plenty of funds each year to fund a new vehicle, so we are prepared for that, and as part of the capital budget, and the money has been set aside. So those were the reasons why I felt that we didn't need to make a change to rates.
And that applies to most of our equipment as well.
Yeah, no, I realize that fund is there. It's just that this it seems to me that this could be a bit more technical.
So we also have still money in this recycling reserve that, has carried on for a number of years, and that was when we, the program didn't get in place as soon as we did, or wanted it to, so we had collected that money and we put it in a recycling reserve to address potential things like this. So if we do, for example, have to have bins for each household, I think there's money in that recycling reserve that we could tap into.
My biggest problem with this is we keep changing the rules. And that's the challenge for, and we get people buying into a program, and I know it's not our driving. We're not driving this ship. That's driven from a provincial level. And we change now blue bags are out, or will be at some point, and people are going to have to go to bins, and there was lots of hard evidence clearly dictated that bins were not the way to go because of snow, rain, etc., and the product was end up being contaminated anyway. And the idea of shifting from the bag to the bin is to reduce contamination, but if the bin is left and it leaks, or it's in the somehow gets tipped over, and whatever the case would be, that's a contaminated product. So I think that's something that we need to, as a council, to get our heads around, dealing with the ministry and start talking about. Please give us a system we can at least stick with, so the public are familiar with it, they understand it. It's simple enough for all of us to use, including me, so we know we can put out and stick with those programs, because this flip-flopping around, and it's happened, I think, almost every 4 or 5 years, maybe even less. And it just makes it very difficult for people to buy into any kind of a comprehensive recycling program. So that's something for us to sort of put a mark on, Kevin, so that going forward we can, and I know you probably have talked to the ministry. But
yeah, and we do, but the one thing that I think is really, again, positive for our community, when we compare and we look at what happens in some of our surrounding communities, amount of garbage per recycling fees and what's happening with them, we see that our residents really put a lot of effort into doing recycling. And I do agree it is challenging when the rules do change, and whether plastic bags are in or out, and we work through that. But certainly we do see the success of our residents wanting to do the recycling.
Thank you. Councillor Lockenberg.
I want to put it out to the city. Well, actually, question first to staff through the chair. Can you speak briefly to the truck itself? So from my understanding, there's an actual technical challenge with finding a truck that can do, like a 3-bin truck that can do garbage recycling and composting. So the technical problems that you guys have to solve are also in the vehicle as well as in the actual, bag, bin thing. Is that correct? Any progress on the truck?
Well, and again, I leave that expertise up to the managers that are in charge of trying to deal with those sorts of pieces. I'm kind of there to make sure that I've got the bank fund is available to pay for it. So I kind of rely heavily on them. One of the things here that certainly from the discussion is that, and one of the reasons that we in the budget meetings had discussed, where we were at with composting, was the fact that if we're not going to go to the composting, looking at some other options, that having again a dual container truck that maybe potentially let people or let the driver be able to drive down the laneways, which is mostly where we have it, and then be able to get containers on either side to dump into either a recycling or the garbage sort of thing, and then allowing them to maybe press up that way, maybe something that could function easier. Again, we still got some work to do, you're right, and we'll be doing that, will be underway here quite shortly.
Well, that would lead me to my point. I think out to the city, this is a perfect opportunity for an entrepreneur to step up and invent something. If we're having the problem, you guys are having trouble finding a solution. We've got engineers in this town, inventors in this town. We put the call out, guys, we're having trouble solving this. I bet you we'll get some interesting responses.
Well, and again, we do have certain locations that also do this similar type of pickup. So we're not the only one, and we're not the only one that's going to be moving off of the blue bag that will have to be challenged with. So it's fair. It's also, like I said, what ours and the efficiency is the fact that we pick up bi-weekly on both products at the same time. What I think we see a lot of times, I think even in North Van they do it, but they tend to do 1 week of garbage and 1 week of recycling, which then you start to double the run anyway. Right? So it's a great, I think, like I said, certainly if someone wants to try to do that, we would be interested to hear.
Well, I would, if you can, I mean, speaking to the press that's here, or if we can take that, is to put it out and say, we've got this challenge, and I think that's the kind of thing that an entrepreneur, ears would perk up and be like, ooh, there's an opportunity there for me.
And I agree, and I think that there will be sort of a catalog of vehicles to sort of look at. What also, when our staff was investigating some of this, was do we go to what you would see recently as the kind of the buckets with the arms, right? So that tends to be sort of some of the direction, and we have some challenges with some of the tight laneways that we have, and also with some of the steepness on some of the laneways that we have. So some of those are also helping, making it more challenging to make a decision on that kind of a project.
And the other thing too, I think is worth keeping in mind going forward, because we have to make this adjustment sooner rather than later, is that we haven't decided yet what type, if any, composting program we're going to use. So to go out and buy a truck, try and search around the world to find a truck that would do 3, we'd probably have to move forward on a dual compartment truck in the short term. I agree. And then decide what type of a composting program. So Councillor Page was next.
Do
and then
you
Councillor
want to
Anderson.
defer to Councillor Anderson, because she's been waiting patiently and she might address
Sorry, I
if
didn't
that's
hear- I
okay.
didn't see
I
you.
would like to
Beg your
take
pardon.
second seat to
Yeah,
that.
okay, go ahead. That's
Yeah,
fine.
so I just want to speak to this motion. So I think we have an interesting opportunity here. The regional district has been working on a organics facility for some time now. They released a report that was provided to the Joint Resource Recovery Committee in early December, and they are going to be getting an updated financial statement as well. So they have a siting location, which is at Central. One of the challenges always when looking at composting or any of these facilities is the siting locations. We're able to use the landfill that has been closed. And I think that there's a huge environmental and an economic benefit here. When we're taking organics out of the waste stream that's going into the landfill, we're saving airspace, and that equates to money down the line. And so we're increasing the amount of time that we'll actually be able to landfill in that space, which is really important, because then again, once we fill up that landfill and we're looking for a new space, siting is always a huge issue, and closure of a landfill is also very expensive. So I know when we're looking at what the costs are going to be to collect these organic materials, it seems really expensive. But I think when we look at it long term, there are huge environmental and economic benefits to looking at organics composting. The regional district has invited us on February 20th to a workshop regarding curbside collection and organics infrastructure. So I do believe that it's important that we defer this decision until after the workshop. I don't think that we're in a position now necessarily. I don't think we all have all of the information that we would like to have before we make this decision. So excuse me, I am still a little bit new, and I'm not sure if I can strike down the motion and make a new motion, or if I make an amendment to this and how this works. But
So we have a couple of things within this motion here.
You could split
So
this.
you could split this up.
yeah, I think though, because there's the financial component is obviously tied. If we are going to be looking at composting, I think this very tied together, and I think that we should.
Could I suggest then that the residential rates be addressed?
Because we're gonna bill before
Because we're going to be,
February 20th.
yeah, we'll be dealing with this before February. The rates,
The bills will go out.
the rates will be the rates. That won't impact, I mean, unless something's going to happen in the next
They're not gonna,
12 months.
they're not gonna put in a composting program this year.
No, they're asking us to be prepared for 2022. So it does give us some time.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing an opportunity to have more information. But
But I think, Councillor Anderson, if you don't mind, the rates are time sensitive.
Okay.
But we could exclude the
appreciate that.
balance of the motion if it was okay. We'd have to strike it down on the floor and then add a new motion. So the original motion, as we read out earlier, includes that full piece there, all the way down that council informed the RDCK we will not participate in the RDCK road curbside.
sorry, Mayor, may I just make an amendment to this motion then, to remove the final phrase?
Well, we could. There's a fair bit of stuff in there, though. It's probably better just to strike it down and come back with the first 2 lines of the motion.
Which is the same thing as an amendment.
Yeah.
Would that work? Is it
The
okay
amendment
with
would be fine.
Would you be okay with that, Sarah? Like just an amendment to it? not
I
totally.
think there could be a resolution to split this resolution into the three parts of it, and then vote on that. Then you're voting on each of them, and you could
That's fine. That's fine.
you could refer the last two pieces or defer them.
So we had a mover and a seconder of Morrison and Renwick
Before,
ready for the full package. So
We're splitting the three.
But you gotta call the question.
I know.
yeah, it's better to call the question, defeat it, and then
Okay.
Can't do
it's
anything
just
now.
easier.
before we do that though,
Pardon?
before we do that, I just,
Right.
one of the things I think I see that, well, from my recollection that I was missing from here is a conversation about a made in Nelson solution and having funds allocated to a pilot program that we can tie in possibly with Selkirk and maybe just pilot a couple different ways to deal with compost. And I don't see anything here for that. So if we're gonna,
That's where the $20,000 is for.
but that's for public education.
Well,
Well, we have to start with we would start with a public consultation piece.
Public education.
Well, part of that's going to, I mean, the idea being here was sort of to reflect what was said at the budget meeting.
Right.
At the budget meeting, we talked about public education, we talked about pilot programs, we talked about
Right,
having
right.
some staffing, so that's what that's about.
This would help us.
I just want to clarify that there's a piece there to
Yep.
pilot something.
Yeah, well, that was the hope, because it certainly was felt from council members at that meeting that there's a big risk in being part of a composting program that is curbside pickup, a cost that we have, cost of pickup, how do we deal with the different situations? Being involved with the regional district, which is risky overall, just based on how our current and services that we've had with them has made them very challenging on when we end up carrying the weight on a lot of things with very little ability to structure that. So again, this is why we went with what we had gotten out of the budget meeting itself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just coming from a farm background. For me, a pilot program is a Quonset and a pile and some livestock and some insects eating it.
A whole lot of insects.
so you could broaden that.
Before we got there, I mean, we would probably want to.
You could,
I think we get the drift with your tone. So is that okay? That we get there?
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So anyway, we're going to ask for a vote. I'm not going to say we're going to defeat. We're going to ask for a vote on the motion that's on the floor. If it's defeated, then you're more than welcome to come back with your change. Okay, so all in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, so now, Councillor Anderson.
Okay, so I would like to can I make a motion then to split these into,
You don't have to make a
you can
motion.
just make a resolution on
You
the
just do
first
1,
part.
2, and 3.
Just do the first part of that if
Do
you
the
wish.
first one. Read the first sentence.
okay. So that the residential waste rates as established in Schedule P of the fees and charges bylaw remain the same for 2019.
Perfect. Seconder, Councillor Luckenberg. Questions?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're okay. We
Sorry.
got a mover and a seconder. Yeah, thank you. Question or comment? All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Now we'll, you got
Well,
the drift, you got the
again,
hammer.
it's up to council if you want to, like two, I'm hearing some interest in moving forward for that in this year.
So we got a meeting tomorrow. We can.
Well, let's keep. We talked to. Okay, so I'll make a motion that council direct staff to allocate $20,000 from the recycling reserve fund to fund any additional costs for public education and pilot programs with post-secondary institutions, including staff, a position regarding household composting not covered by operational revenue.
Hang on, just give. It's never a bad idea. I know you run these through your head. I do it myself, and I don't even write them down, right? So, if you get a chance, scribble them down as you go, so that Sarah can. She's got to follow you and get them into the computer. So how are you doing on that one, Sarah?
Sorry, Sarah.
I'm okay.
Thank you, sir.
You're all right?
How do we get
Yes, you
university
should read it
business?
so that.
I need it read back because I don't know where the university business came from.
Yeah, I don't know if you necessarily want to limit it to just,
Sure.
College
Yeah,
or-
yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You're
I
right.
don't like.
Well,
Sorry,
let's read
just I'm
it.
doing it
Let's
on
read
the
it.
fly.
So, just a second, please. So let's read it so the mover understands what was said, and if you want to delete a word here and there, now's your chance.
That council directs staff to allocate $20,000 from the recycling reserve to fund any additional costs for public education and pilot program that includes post-secondary institutions, position regarding household composting not covered by operational revenue.
So you want the last.
Okay, so why don't you delete
So-
post-secondary?
It's the original motion.
No, it's including the pilot.
And pilot program, including a staff position, right?
Well, hang on, we'll, just a second here, we putting a staff position in beside this too?
That was already.
That was already in
The
there.
original.
It would
It's
be
already
like-
in there.
It would be like your water ambassador.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
okay.
One more time?
Yes.
Yep, for clarity. It's always okay. It's never
That
bad.
council directs staff to allocate $20,000 from the recycling reserve to fund any additional cost for public education and pilot program, including a staff position regarding household composting not covered by operational revenue.
Yep.
Need a seconder.
Mover, seconder, Councillor Luxembourg.
I just want to clarify, so basically, we feel we might do better than anticipated on the regular, just on the budget, and there might be enough revenues to cover that we don't have to dip in the recycling reserve. That's what that last part of that, this resolution is, that we would dip into this only if necessary.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just speak to that for the benefit of Councillor Morrison, who wasn't during those discussions.
Councillor Anderson wasn't there either.
Oh, and Brittany wasn't either. So when we were having these discussions, I think it was coming up while the RDCK, while people are preparing and while we're looking at what can and cannot be done in the backyards, that it might be best to partner up with the entrepreneur community and the post-secondary institution, which is where that came from, at like creating some funds and availability to actually try out different systems. So we could see how we can process this level of waste in the area. And I would like to basically make sure we're making some opportunities for people to see what we can do with this. One of the things that came up was potentially there's stuff being done with black fly larvae that basically consumes this kind of stuff and turns it into a structured protein that's then fed to livestock. But I don't want to pick any one thing. I want to work as a government, as a educational, and as a community, and see what kind of solutions could be out there. I want to look for them.
We're on the motion, right?
Yeah, I have a question. So I'm definitely in favor of public education, and I do recognize that backyard composting is the most environmental and economic. It's our best option. It's not available for everyone. I just want clarification though on the staff position. Would that exclude then a contractor coming in? I know with the Water Smart Ambassador program, that was an entire program that was developed by CBT, and so the education, the training for that ambassador was developed outside of the city. And I'm just wondering, with a $20,000 budget, including a staff position, if we're assuming it's going to be like a summer student, that doesn't necessarily give us or give staff the time to develop the program and oversee the program and have that person out in the community, or a contractor that has experience with this might be better suited to that type of position. And I think that summer students are great, but considering that this would be a really sort of narrow, specific program that we already don't have in-house, that having it, shared with other communities, there's benefits. And so I'm just concerned that that puts more sort of stress on whichever staff member has to sort of oversee this position and develop this program and oversee this program. It's January. If we're expecting to sort of have someone hired by, May 15th, that's like a pretty short period of time to, figure out exactly what the best use of that person's time and how they're going to engage with the community and how they're going to educate the public. So I'm just wondering if we need to change the wording so that we could also consider a contractor for that type of role.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be limiting to a staff position. We could just say opposition, I guess. Whether that's a contractor or a staff, then.
Is that for me to delete that word? It's the word staff.
Yeah.
I think that's preferable.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't meant to be limiting.
Sure.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because you two weren't here at the time, I think we did a lot of, talking about the different options, and the idea of a kind of Maiden Nelson option felt at the time a way to control the system, having being able to Nelson to control the system and how it works, rather than being part of a much larger system, and also that idea of not moving around the compost from one location to another location, and keeping the program collection simple by having an ambassador coming and having an education program, much like the Fire Smart program, within town. So I just think that it felt like a good solution for us at the time, and I think the wording is better now. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Thanks, Councillor Page. All right, onward and upward. You got all that clear as mud? Good. Council action items. So we got this list of attached as a list reflects the accumulation. Well, that's interesting. Accumulation of council resolutions passed to date requiring further action. Staff has updated the current status of these action items. They're all before you folks, and if there's any one in particular you wanted to have a little bit of a briefing on from either Kevin, Colin, or Sarah, you're more than welcome to speak up now or forever hold your peace, at least till the next meeting.
Yeah.
And this list will show up again.
Yeah.
Councillor Renwick, first hand up.
Yeah, I have a couple. I have a couple, if you don't mind. A flag policy.
Flagpole.
Well, it's under flag policy, but it's about a flagpole. But who's in charge of changing flags around town?
Well, that's a good question, because ours we change, but we have a lot of private folks that have their own flags and they depend on us to change them, such as.
Sorry, I'm taking heat from I'm taking heat from my mother-in-law for the terrible flag that's flying above the Civic Theatre.
Oh, that's ours.
Oh, it's ours, exactly.
Yeah, I know.
I just wonder if there's somebody in charge, because that really shouldn't happen.
No,
We shouldn't have
couldn't agree more.
tattered flags. That's the first one, sorry. And what is the Blue Dot campaign? This was well before our time.
You can Google Blue Dot campaign and make sure you have a nice cup of tea.
Okay, never mind. Never mind. I withdraw
It's
my
an
question.
environmental program. I
Okay.
mean, but there's quite a bit to read if you want to get well versed.
I thought I'd get a short answer here, and if I'm not, then no problem.
So there, you will see on development